we're going to do a little bit on the ancestry tree that we have developed. I don't know if all of you have seen the WashCoVA family tree that we put together, but it is, I'm trying to get back to my screen. But it is really where we have been storing all the information on this project. And I am having some problems. Well, let me do it this way. Can you see the spreadsheet that I put up?
Well, we're still seeing I think the ancestry.com.
Ancestry.
Okay, that should do it. Okay, so what we have here is a document called the Cohabitation list. And the Cohabitation list is a document that was put together. Yeah. No, that's not right. Okay, let me try this again. Elijah just told me that what I'm talking about. Okay, I see what happened. Okay, spreadsheet is up. Okay, thank you. So this, and I just saw a note from Kathy Harrison. We'll get into how to access the family tree here in just a minute. This is a printed version of the cohabitation list. When the Civil War was over and the Reconstruction effort was underway, people like Thaddeus Harris and others were involved in trying to establish African Americans in the law as real human beings. That sounds like a foreign concept to us, but that's largely what they were going through. And one of the things they did was to go through and do a survey of the men and women who were in the counties who were living together as man and wife. They were cohabitating. It was not legal prior to that for blacks to be married to each other, but these were pretty much the same thing. These were people who were living in relationships and had children in many cases. For example, look at line 2. Edward Jones was age 37 when this survey was done in 1867. He was born in Washington County. He lives in Washington County now. His occupation was as a farmer. This is where it gets interesting. This lists the last owner of the formerly enslaved person. In this case, Henry Preston was the last owner of Edward Jones, and Henry Preston was in Washington County. Then we switch over to the spouse. In this case, Emmeline Taylor was the spouse of Edward Jones, as we would describe it today. She was age 30. She was born in Virginia. She currently resides in Washington County. Her last owner was Frank Preston, and his residence was in Washington County. So that gives you leads for where the enslaved people were enslaved and who their masters were prior to emancipation. Now look at the last two columns. This tells you who Edward Jones and Emmeline Taylor's children were. Moses, age 6, Agnes, age 4, Emma, age 2, and it goes on down the list. And they commenced the cohabitation in 1855, according to the survey. This list goes through a large number of people, as you can see, who were African Americans who were cohabitating in Washington County. Now, not all counties have the cohabitation list, the cohabitation register. Obviously, Washington County does. We have taken this information as the cornerstone for what we have done with the WashCoVA family tree. I'm just scrolling down to the bottom of this just to give you an idea of how much information is there. It's a significant amount of information. So with a team of volunteers that we had, that we've been working with, we have put together an ancestry family tree. We've gone on Ancestry and we've created a family tree. And the way, is that showing up there?
Yes.
The way we did this, we started by putting in a person's name. And I think the first person we put in was a McClanahan. And we created under the sources a new source. Ancestry does not have this, but we added in this case the list of colored voters in Washington County. So we have that information as well. That's a local record that, again, Ancestry does not have. So between these two, between the list of the first African-American voters who voted in the 1867 election to ratify the Constitution, the new Constitution under Reconstruction, and the cohabitation list, there's suddenly a flood of new information, at least in Washington County, that you have available to you. Let me tell you briefly about the election. The southern states were required to establish new constitutions to get rid of the old Civil War and Confederacy constitutions that they had. In 1867, Washington County or Virginia voted on its new constitution. And there is a list of all of the African Americans who voted in that election. So we did two things. I told you already that we were putting the cohabitation list in here. We also started putting the records of the people who voted in that 1867 election. You might think at first that they're the same lists, but they're really not. There were African Americans in 1867 who were cohabitating who did not vote. There were people in 1867 who voted who were not cohabitating. So there is overlap, but there's also additional information that you don't get just from that one report. So we've created this as an other source, a new source. And in this case, we put this individual by the name of Charles Brown in. And he was not on the cohabitation list, but we did find him in subsequent census reports. For example, you see the 1880 census shown here. So by doing that, we couple it with his information. This shows that he was married to Sarah Campbell and gives more information on their family. But this is information that through the cohabitation list and the voting registration was not available through Ancestry. We then look at the hints and the Ancestry family trees. And I'll pull this one up and we can click on the view individual member trees. The algorithm of, excuse me, the algorithm of Ancestry looks at information that you've posted in a tree and matches it with possible hints, other people who have information that's similar to this. And in this case, there are several, but I want to focus in particular on the first one, and that's the one of the Cosby family tree and Amin Aleem. And Amin is one of the first people we worked with. So we're going to bring him in and we're going to have a conversation here in a second. But basically what I did was to go into Ancestry and write a message right here to Amin. And I basically told him, and I think this was February of 2019, basically told him we have found a possible match with information that you appear to have in your family tree. And then I told him about the project. So at this point, I'm going to stop screen sharing and we're going to bring Amin on board. And Amin, if you would unmute yourself, we'll have I'd like you to tell your side of how this transpired. Hi, Ali.
Hey, how are you all? Can you hear me?
I'm not hearing him.
Yeah, we
Can
can
you hear
hear you.
Okay, I can hear yes.
Yes, you can. Okay. Juan, can you show the slides, please? Can you hear me?
Yeah, give me a sec.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so the goal of my short presentation, and Walt covered a lot of it, is to walk through really our family journey to connect with our ancestors from Washington County. My hope is that you'll be encouraged by our story, and also be encouraged to continue your journey and find the successes that we have. And also at the end, I want to provide, I hope it's a guide for other organizations who want to be a resource for African Americans trying to find their ancestors as well. I'll talk about how we overcame 3 roadblocks, including the 1870 census wall, and how through the help of this project, we've collected with our living descendants with the same ancestors. Next slide, please. Okay, because we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, I picked up the family research from one of my aunts. During this research, we encountered our first roadblock, which was we just didn't know our oral history wasn't extensive enough to bypass or go through or break through the wall of just not knowing further than my great grandparents, their grandparents. So as you see from this diagram, we started our research with my grandmother's mother's side because we had the strongest family relationships with them. My great grandmother grew up with that side. My grandparents grew up with that side. My parents, uncles grew up with those cousins. So we had a strong relationship there. We could share our oral histories and get further along. But as we researched other of their grandparents, we just couldn't break through not knowing who they were, what their names were. So that was our first roadblock. Next slide, please. It wasn't until when another aunt found this Bible reference. Now, this is the Bible reference from my great grandmother, Maddie Katie Brown. We call her Guy. This is Guy's Bible. Guy is in the blue listed at the bottom, and her husband Thornton Cosby is listed there. Why this was so valuable for us was this is the last 2 people on the list were the only people we knew. So this unlocked our research. It gives, if you look except for the top line are her parents. And the other lines, the other 6 lines, 6 or 7 lines are her siblings. We found out through other census, because we plugged this into Ancestry.com. And of course it generates hints. We followed all the hints. And we came to find out that our grandmother was the youngest of 11. And 3 had either died at birth or died young. And the remaining ones are listed here. They got married, had children, and those type of things. So this unlocked our research, finding this document. And this is not the only page. It was 3 pages. It listed the births, the deaths, and the marriages. But this unlocked our research because it gave her parents. So now we can search her parents, search the census records, and find out more about our family, our ancestors. Next slide, please. So now that we had that information, we plugged in the Ancestry, we came to another roadblock. We couldn't find any information past 1870, the 1870 census wall. But accepting that, we said, okay, well, let's find everybody in this line. And you see in the green, highlighted there in the green, the line that we were searching for. We found everybody, but one guy's paternal grandparents, we could not find guys' paternal grandparents on the 1870 census. Next slide, please. So this is when I first started to participate or came into contact with the Washington County family tree. And if you're looking in Ancestry, you have an Ancestry account, you can look for WashCoVA family tree, and you should find this there. So this is the goal. And this is the goal that Walt and the Historical Society there in Washington County began this Ancestry tree with. They wanted to focus on the 2,876 individuals who were in Washington County in the 1860s. Learn where they came from, where they and their descendants had gone. So I was one of those. As Walt mentioned before, Charles Brown, that's the person. That's the person we could not find. Next slide, please. So in February 2019, Walt asked a simple question. Is this person the same person in your tree? Is this person your ancestor? And looking at the reference, Ancestry says Charles Reveron. But when we look at the census record, the actual census record, we see Charles, but what it looks like, instead of Reveron, it looks like Brown. Next slide, please. It looks like Brown. So the next wall, the third roadblock, not that one, I'm sorry, go back one, please. Yes, thank you. The next wall, this is the wall that we ran into, the transcription that Ancestry gave us said Charles Reveron. So I said, no, that's not us. But when I looked at the actual census record, it does look like Brown. There's a little mark above the R that makes the R look like an I and throws everything off. So this is actually who we were looking for. Next slide, please. Thinking that that was all we could find. We had researched everybody, followed all the hints, got everybody on all the census that were available for them. We then turned our attention to finding out how they lived in that area. How did our ancestors live? That led us to, or Walt actually referred us to the resources in the Historical Society. I picked up one book by Dr. Hagee, which is called After the War Was Over, Reconstruction in Washington County, Virginia, 1865 to 1870. Next slide, please. In that book, it references the Freedmen's Bureau cohabitation list of 1866, which Walt just went through. In that book, it has 718 husbands and wives included. Their names, where they were born, where they lived in 1866, and the names of their 808 children collectively. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Go back one. I want to focus on a couple of more things. This document is so important because before this document, we didn't know the surname of the spouse of the wives, or of the spouse of the male, right? That is oftentimes lost. They accept the name of the husband, and then the maiden name is lost. But with the maiden name listed here, we now can search and track other census data to see, were you in the Clark family on such and such census? We can track those things. The ages are listed here their ages as of 1866, which you can track backdate, and figure out when they were born. The children are listed here, which you can confirm other census. The commencement date of cohabitation is listed. That's the marriage year. The most important thing, I think, for researchers looking to find out more is the last enslaver. That's something that we're just trying to find. We can't really find out unless you have more information. I think this one document is so valuable because it gives us that information. There's two reasons why I think this is the most helpful piece of information for us as we do our research. Next slide, please. Through tracking the last enslaver, we were able to find more ancestors. You see, I have highlighted there John Ernest, found on 3 different records. And each record has a weeks. The first in the record to the far left, you have Guy's mother, Theodosia Weeks. On the marriage record we have listed, it was Dosia, but the full name is Theodosia. We have her sister, Mary Ann Weeks, which I think will be important in later conversations. We have her mother, Sarah. We have her father, we have her father listed as Peter. In our record, it's Peter is one of the middle names. It's the same record. But then you have the middle record. You have the spouse whose name is Theodosia. And when I saw this, I said, you have a Theodosia Weeks as a spouse of someone else. Then you have, in my ancestors, Theodosia Week, you have 2 Theodosia Weeks enslaved by the same person. The age differences look like that would maybe your aunt. That has to be, because the tradition is to name people after sisters and aunts and grandmothers to share the name. So through inference, through connecting the last enslaver, we believe that this is a relative. And if that's a relative, you have 2 weeks enslaved by the same person. Then the third record on the right, you also have another weeks. So then you have Peter, Theodosia, and this other weeks. I'm sorry, on my screen is too small for me to see. But we have them all enslaved by the same person, which to us means that they're siblings. Next slide. Howard Weeks. So the second piece, the second reason why this is important is because we believe it allowed us to break through the 1870 census wall. Now here's the record of Charles Brown and Sarah Campbell, who were enslaved by Arthur Hutton. We then went to the 1860s census, the so-called slave schedule, looked under Arthur Hutton, and found that he did indeed have male and female slaves about the same age, roughly. We know ages, is speculative anyway for these records. So we believe that that's them. Of course, we don't know for sure, but it's our belief that that's them somewhere in there. So we were able to break through the 1870 wall, we believe, through tracing the enslaved, the last enslaver. Next slide, please. So we've taken, as Walt said, the cohabitation list and entered all 718 families and their children in the record and in the family tree. If your ancestor's name is on the cohabitation list, their name is also in the WashCoVA family tree. This is a record of Thomas William King Brody, We've made a couple of notations to indicate that they're on the cohabitation list. You see the asterisk by the end of the name. You see the blue record cohabitation list. We've also entered as a fact, whatever fact is listed on the cohabitation list. And for him, he was a free person of color. So under the last enslaver, we have free. We also have listed the source. So if you come in contact with our tree and you see this record and you want to find out where we got the information, we've put the source there, cohabitation list. You can look up the source and look at, and I believe it's 15 pages of the cohabitation list and find your record. And I think through the comments, someone saw one of their ancestors already. Next slide, please. We've also taken the voter polls from 1867 and entered those names into the cohabitation list. Next slide, please. In the same way, we've taken the 498 persons that were on that list and put their facts on the WashCoVA family tree with the reference. And this, the voting polls were actually partitioned by divisions. It was 9 divisions. We put all of them in our tree. Next slide, please. So we have put 2 resources on there. I think it'll be very valuable for those looking and doing research right now. There's more information that the Historical Society has and will be going up in the future. If you are an organization looking to do the same thing, take your unique, my advice is to take your unique information and somehow digitize it and make it available for those doing research. Next slide, please. We've chosen to use Ancestry.com. You can find us under WashCoVA family tree. In our tree, we have 4,025 people. We have 3,475 records. We have 1,976 hints, and we have 1,243 member trees that connect to the people in our tree. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. On the side here, you see, you also have to build your team. And on the side, you see the team that's been working with us, entering the data. Next slide, please. Finally, you need to get the word out. Walt has been doing a good job of having, I think, an article or more every year. This is the last article, I believe, that went out, I think, last year about this time, about this conference. It was because of this article that I was able to connect, or we were able to connect with a living descendant of our ancestors. So I'm very excited to have met them, and I look forward to moving forward, connecting with them in the future. Next slide. Are there any questions? Are we taking questions now, Walt, or later?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Are there any questions?
We've got one from Lisa, a couple from Lisa Archer. You showed a Bible listing on your presentation. Did you get that online?
No, actually, this was in our archives, in our whatever family archives you have. Maybe it's an attic or a basement or a room or old documents. We just happened to go through them one day looking for pictures, I believe, and came across it. And in it, we opened it up and it had this jewel of information. So we scanned it, and that's why we have it here, is right here behind me as well. That's how we got that. But you don't have to have a family Bible. I think, if you have a family reunion program that has names on it, you can use that. What we did was we took all of the oral history, and mainly from my aunts, uncles, and my mom, just picking their brain about what they knew about who, getting names. I remember this. We went to a family reunion here, and Here's a program. So it really just started from there. You can just take any piece of information, really anything, everything will help you in your journey. Any little piece, you know, we had bits of pieces of information and conflicting sometimes because of memories and things. But it was very rewarding to confirm the facts with actual documents along the process. And that's kept us enthused with going further.
There's also a question that I think we've touched on, that how to get to the Washington County family tree. And it's simply a matter of putting that in the search engine and finding it. Also about the Bible record, what you may find, you know, think about it this way: a family has a lot of descendants, and maybe only one of those descendants winds up with the family Bible. And if they're on Ancestry, they might have taken a picture of their family Bible, the family page of it, and put it on as an image with their family tree. So by going through this approach and looking at other family trees, there's a good chance, or there's a decent chance anyway, that you may find that family Bible that some other distant cousin has that you didn't know anything about. There's also a question about how to find cemeteries where our people might be buried. We will have a PDF posted here shortly that lists all the historically African-American cemeteries in Washington County. We also have a couple of books. We have some volunteers who put together a couple of books. The first one is High on a Windy Hill, and they have gone through every brush pile that you can find to find cemeteries in Washington County, taken down the names, put together directions on how to get there. We've got those books in our Historical Society library. The book is available for purchase, and there have been follow-ups, compendiums to that subsequently as well. So yes, those are available. Let me see if we've got another question. Okay. Okay, I think that does it. Does anybody else have a question? Okay. Okay. Someone just asked, not finding out where to search for something like that in the search engine. I created this family tree in my own account under the name of Walter Jenney, WALTERJENNY, and we have maintained it that way far too long. It really belongs in the account of the Historical Society, and we're going to get it moved over to there eventually. But if you go to Walter Jenney and look at my family trees, you will also find it there. It's entirely possible that it'll be easier for you to find me as a member and find WashCoVA family tree that way. And might be easier than putting it in as a search engine. Victoria Powers asks, my grandfather is on the tree, but he also has siblings. Why aren't they on the tree? Amin, do you want to address that?
I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why they're not on the tree.
Well, it may be that we just didn't have that information. You know, it may be that we have the grandfather because the grandfather was just a child at the time of 1866 on the Cohab list. So we put him in there. But at the time, we did not have family and descendant information for that grandfather later. We are going to continue this project.
You mean on the cohabitation list itself, though?
Yes.
That's my assumption. Yeah.
She's saying my grandfather is on the tree, and it may be that that person in 1866 was just a small child. I don't know, but it's possible.
It's possible.
And it's possible we just did not have that information yet. We are going to continue expanding this over time and keep adding information. Victoria, if you will send us information or at least a link to your tree, and if you like, we can add that information, and we can keep going with that by adding more information, and that simply makes it a richer resource for everyone involved. Dolores asked, please explain the cohabitation list. It was part of the process during Reconstruction to try to identify who was living together as husband and wife and who their children were. And they basically took a census of all the African Americans that they could find in the county. The Freedmen's Bureau did this. And they would put this together in what's called a register. Most of the registers survive. You can go to the Library of Virginia and see if it is listed there. That's one place to get it. I think that's where we originally, I think, I know Dr. Hagee has known about it long before I was born, I think. But that's one place to go to find if they are still in existence for another county other than Washington County. I mean, Dr. Hadelim asked, how has your research changed your understanding?
Yes, so just finding out who your ancestors are and what they did, who they're around, is so enlightening. It's so rewarding. It's so inspiring. It allows us to move forward. It allows us to move forward with confidence and enthusiasm and share that. It's a whole idea of this is the family lineage. This is what they did. It explains the traits that we think are unique to us. We find out that is not. In connecting with the other descendant, most recently connected with his great grandmother, looks exactly like my mother. And so the traits we thought came from a different line, we now know what line it came from. So it's just powerful. We can move with confidence, as you know, Dr. Hood, we can move with confidence, and we can instill that in our children so that they can instill that in their children. One of the presenters spoke about how he was able to trace through Ancestry his lineage all the way back 1700s, I believe. That's so powerful. It's so powerful. And so much was taken from us. The knowledge of that information was taken from us, and we're reclaiming it. We're reclaiming the history. And so we can move forward with power. We can move forward with confidence and enthusiasm and knowledge, and we can move forward together. That's why we're looking to reconnect and be together and move forward stronger together.
Exactly. One question, my great-grands are not listed either, the Watkinses and the Willoughbys. We just may not have gotten to them yet.
Well, I just thought about that. The cohabitation list only lists those people that were cohabitating. So if they were there and weren't married, quote unquote, cohabitating, they would not have been on this list. However, they may be on a census list. And when we're doing our when we're entering them, I don't think we've gone as deep as to find out, follow all of the hints. You see, there's a whole lot of hints left to follow. But if when we build out those trees, we will find them on a census or one census or another. So it's not that they've been overlooked. It's just that the 1866 cohabitation list had a specific purpose of registering those who were married or cohabitating at the time. And in a sense, when you're doing your research, that's one of the documents you're looking for. Marriages, birth records, death records, military records. Well, this is the marriage record because there was no other marriage record. This was it. So if they weren't married at the time, it doesn't mean that they weren't there, they weren't around. It just means that they weren't married at the time. So it's totally possible this list misses a whole group of people because of that.
And I mentioned earlier that there was some overlap between the voting register and the census and the cohabitation list. You know, think about somebody who did not vote in 1867, who was not cohabitating in 1866, and died in 1869, so they're not on the 1870 census. Their children or grandchildren may be on the census, but we would not have a record of them through what we have done so far. But we're
And it's also,
hoping to make connections with enough people that we can fill in those gaps as well.
and it's also the case, Walt, as you've indicated in the past, that people were moving. They may have moved before the census or right after, so we might not have caught them. So that's a good question for you to follow up on, to figure out where they were, why weren't they on the list? And that will be enlightening for you and your family. That's a wonderful question. Where were they? In fact, that was the question for me looking for Charles Brown. Where were they in 1870? Where were they?
Exactly. Someone asked, can you see the cohabitation list on Ancestry? The list itself is not on Ancestry. What we've done is take the information individually and put it into Ancestry, but we will post for you what I showed earlier on the screen, the cohabitation list, so you will be able to download that and have access to it. Any other questions? Someone asked, is the cohabitation list unique to Washington County, or is there one for most counties? There is one for most counties. By definition, that means that not all counties either did a cohabitation list or that list still exists. Remember, a lot of records were disposed of after Reconstruction collapsed. So even if there was a cohab list in some counties, it's possible those disappeared and were disposed of. We were just fortunate, at least in Washington County, that we did have access to one.
Right, and excuse me, these were put together by the Freedmen's Bureau, which had a lot of access in Southwest Virginia. Other parts of Virginia, they may not have had as much access, and definitely in other states, there weren't any cohabitation lists. I looked for North Carolina because we have relatives there as well, ancestors there, and there was no cohabitation list. And the Freedmen's Bureau did not have as much access. Let me just.
Well, I mean, it has been over 2 years since you and I first met, and we have never met in person. I hope that one of these days we'll get a chance to. Amin is an accountant in the Atlanta area, and I'm sure that when Elijah goes back to Atlanta, you two will have a lot to talk about. Just don't talk about me when I'm gone.
Yeah, we intend to come up to Plum Creek Road somehow, some way, and get back to our Brown family roots.
I can just imagine how many hours you have put into this, posting that data over and over and over. And it's not just a matter of putting in their name, but you have to tie it to the cohabitation list of Washington County, showing what the source is. So really appreciate everything you did to make this come to life.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. That gives me the opportunity to also thank the team for their hard work. There's no way I could have done this by myself, and I did not. So I want to thank the team for their countless hours as well, volunteering. Thank you very much.
You bet. Okay, we will, and there's one final question. Barbara Walton wants to know if we can submit additions and corrections to the tree. Yes, you can. Send it to us as a message. You can send it to me or Amin. Probably would be easier to send it to me, and then we'll cuss it and discuss it, and we'll get it added in.